Today's scripture is found in Matthew 6, verses 19 to 24, and I will be reading from New King James Version translation. Do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves a treasure in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, your heart will be also. The lamp of the body. It is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon.
Talia, you did a great job with that scripture reading. Thank you so much for reading that for us. Praise team, choir, thank you for giving me a piece of heaven today. Were you blessed by that music today? My heart was singing. Thank you so much. Let's give God a round of applause for our music thus far. So we're in a series learning about generosity, gaining to give. And today's title is the Pursuit of True Wealth. We're in this series because we want to learn how to become generous people, or to become more generous. And I began to unlock the capacity within my own heart. Really, I began to unlock the generosity, to become a generous person in a surprising way, an unexpected way. Have you ever thought that you were something, but you've realized that you weren't really what you thought you were? Has that ever happened to you? That happened to me a few weeks ago, actually this last few weeks. So I have mentioned this, I think it was last week. There was a book entitled Mindset by a professor at Stanford, and she compares and contrasts between two mindsets. What she calls the first one is she calls a fixed mindset, a mindset where you think, well, I am this way, and when I make a mistake, this is who I am, and I can never change. But she contrasts a fixed mindset with what she calls a growth mindset. And a growth mindset is thinking, well, when I encounter a mistake on a test, or when I make a mistake in a relationship, that's an opportunity for me to learn and to improve. In other words, a growth mindset says, when I encounter an obstacle, it's an opportunity. I thought I had a growth mindset until I was challenged by one speaker at an event. It was a non-religious event, a leadership event. And the speaker, his name was David Goggins. Have you guys heard of him before? He wrote a book called Can't Hurt Me. I haven't read it. This man, good man, strong, Navy SEAL. He's done a Hell Week and the Navy SEALs training 3 times. Ultra marathoner. I heard him. I didn't care much for the language, a little bit too strong. But he said a line that stuck with me at that conference, that really challenged me and motivated me to become a more generous person. And he said this. I was one of 6,000 people in that conference here in Schaumburg last month. He said that the most important conversation is the conversation that you have with yourself. The most important conversation is the conversation that you have with yourself. And so I took that idea, I resonated with that because that rings so true in my life. But then I did something even more courageous, which was scary. I started asking myself, what are the limiting beliefs and the ideas and fears that I'm telling myself And you know, one idea surfaced in my mind, and it was this. I have been telling myself, you know what? Thinking about the growth of as my role here as pastor of this beautiful church. I was pointing the finger and thinking, if only our leaders would just step up enough and we'd be more focused and committed, then we would grow as a church. Right? So I was replaying that thought in my mind. Okay? And these thoughts, you know those thoughts that you just linger in your mind that you tell yourself, and then you even take that thought, and many times that thought is a limiting, fearful belief, and then you repeat that to other people in your close circle, and then they're like, oh yeah, I support that, and then everyone starts believing that to be true. Well, that's what I was unintentionally doing, and I realized something. I thought I had a growth mindset, but I realized that I had a fixed mindset. And I said, you know what? The problem are not the leaders in my church. The greatest barrier to the growth of this local church is your senior pastor, your lead pastor, Pastor Nestor Soriano. I had to look at myself in the mirror and take full responsibility and full ownership for my life and my leadership. And it was when I became honest and aware that this was a limiting belief, when I could be honest with myself, to name that negative script and to own that and say, that's a false script. Let's take responsibility and take ownership. That was the beginning of unlocking a growth mindset, a gospel-centered mindset, an infinite mindset, an abundance mindset in my mind and my heart. It changed me. And I went to God with this, and I said, God, I want a faith mindset, not one based on fear, playing the victim. I want a mindset of faith, of abundance, of believing that God can do the impossible in me and through me. I want that. And do you know what has happened as a result of that? This was an unintended benefit or a surprise benefit that I received. When I decided to face my true self and be honest when I was weak, when I began to take full ownership and responsibility for my life in my leadership, it unlocked the capacity for me to be more generous to the people whom I love and whom I serve. That was the unintentional benefit of being honest with myself. You see, to take full ownership and responsibility for your life, that is the most generous thing that you can do for yourself, for your family, for the people that you work with, and the people in your community. Why is that? Why is taking full responsibility and full ownership for our lives the most generous thing that we can do? When you and I take responsibility for our actions, we are in a better position to contribute to other people's well-being. By being responsible and emotionally healthy, we can offer more to those who are in need. We can be more generous, whether it's through your time, your resources, or your emotional support. This creates a ripple effect of generosity as you can contribute to the lives of others from a place of strength, not from a place of scarcity. And that is the power of honesty, of taking full responsibility and ownership, because then it allows us to become more generous. Friends, the title for today's teaching is The Pursuit of True Wealth. And what we're going to learn today is how we can begin being and becoming generous. And we're going to learn how being generous is your most worthy pursuit. Jesus has something to say about this in Matthew chapter 6. Let's go there. Matthew chapter 6. If you have a Bible, you're welcome to turn there. If you don't have a physical one, feel free to turn to your smartphone, Bible app on your smartphone. I have it on my phone, or your tablet. And we're going to be in Matthew chapter 6. Let's read these first three verses of the passage for today's teaching. Matthew 6, verse 19. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. And by the way, when it's in red, who's speaking here? It's Jesus, the creator of the universe, the one who spoke things into existence. So when you see it's in red, I better pay attention, right? Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin, like rats and raccoons and bed bugs. I hate bed bugs. Where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. Verse 21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What's Jesus teaching us? Jesus is teaching his followers to prioritize eternal treasure over earthly ones. He warns against storing up material treasures. Well, why is this? It's because we can lose material wealth in a heartbeat. We can accumulate all the wealth that we can in the short time that we have on planet Earth. And it just takes one economic crash, like the Great Depression or what happened in 2008, you lose everything. In Jesus' day, moths were a significant threat to clothing, especially fine garments. Moths would come in and they would eat these expensive garments of people. Vermin, in biblical times, it was known as either like rust, right, a natural element, or rodents like rats. They were common threats to metals and food. And people who would store their material wealth, their treasures, like gold, jewelry, and precious items in their homes, those material possessions would be subject to vermin. Sometimes they would even bury their material wealth in the ground, and the vermin, rust or rodents or vermin, would be a threat to their material possessions. Jesus challenges us to do an alignment audit. Do you know what an alignment audit is? An alignment audit is when we take what we really believe, what's most important, our values, and we do an audit and ask ourselves, is my life and the way that I'm living in line with my values and the vision that I have and God has for my life? That's what an alignment audit is. And friends, I want to encourage you, I believe that one way to grow and to flourish and to thrive as human beings is to regularly do an alignment audit. I do this when I'm in my prayer time every single day. But it's to go to the values that I really cherish and believe and ask myself, am I actually living this out in my body? Am I living this out? Jesus challenges us to do an alignment audit. He challenges us to make sure that our priorities are aligned with his eternal and enduring values. Why is this? It's because God wants us to have a heart like his. Does God have a selfish heart or does he have a generous heart? God wants us to have generous hearts. So what is generosity anyway? What is generosity? Generosity is having a giving heart. Can you say giving heart with me? Giving heart. That's what generosity is. Generosity is having a giving heart. This means that I prioritize enduring values over temporary gain. It means that I value eternal, lasting values over earthly and temporal gain. To be generous means that I invest my resources to serve God, to bless humanity, and build a legacy of lasting impact. So let me frame it this way. Usually in church language, we use a term called stewardship. Have you heard that term before? And usually when we think of stewardship, we think of, what do you think of when you think of stewardship? When you hear the word stewardship in church settings? Money, right? Well, I used to say that stewardship are 3 T's, okay? First, your talent, the way that God has designed you. Your time, right? The time that you have on earth. And then your treasure, which includes finances. But there's a 4th T that I've been thinking about, which I think is a really important component that God has designed us with. And I'll call that tenacity. It is energy and drive and purpose to pour my heart into things that are worthy and that have eternal value and eternal consequences. So stewardship, the resources that you and I have, 4 T's, tenacity, talent, time, and treasure. Generosity means that I invest my resources, my tenacity, my talent, my time, my treasure to serve God, to bless humanity, and to build a legacy of lasting impact. Not a temporal one, but a legacy of lasting impact. And I believe that there are people here in this sanctuary today, those of you watching online, who want to make and continue to make lasting impact on the lives of the people around you. It's why many of you come here to church every week. It's because you want to invest in your spiritual growth and in your children's spiritual growth so that you can experience the joy of lasting benefits, right? Everlasting benefits. What is the opposite of generosity? Yeah, that's right. The opposite of generosity is greed. When I'm greedy, what's happening? It means that I'm chasing my selfish desires and I'm hoarding and keeping all my wealth to myself. You know, I've seen those shows on, I think it's like HGTV or other shows where there's always like this family member that's a hoarder. You know what a hoarder is? If you are a hoarder, I'm not calling you out. But that's the image that comes to my mind, right? You've accumulated all of these materials. You can hardly step, into your living room because you have to step over all the newspapers and the things that you've accumulated. At the end of my life, friends, I do not want people to say, that guy Nestor, he was a greedy man. I don't want that to be said at my funeral. I don't want people to say, that guy Nestor, he hoarded all of his resources and he used them all on himself. It reminds me of a story that I read in a book. I just finished this book. It's entitled The Psychology of Money. A friend of mine recommended it, and it is one of the best books I've read on finance. Awesome book. And I can see why it's a top seller. It's an excellent book. And Morgan Housel, he shares this story that in the introduction, and I read it this week. So Morgan Housel, the author of this book, The Psychology of Money, he says, my favorite Wikipedia entry begins, Ronald James Reed was an American philanthropist, investor, janitor, and gas station attendant. I love that. Okay? So remember, he's going to contrast these two characters. The first one is Reed. He's an American philanthropist, an investor, a janitor, and a gas station attendant. What's up with that? So Morgan writes, Ronald Reed was born in rural Vermont. He was the first person in his family to graduate high school. He made all the more impressive made all the more impressive by the fact that he hitchhiked to campus each day. And for those who knew Ronald Reed, there wasn't much else worth mentioning. His life was about as low-key as they come. Reed fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years. He swept floors at JCPenney for 17 years. He bought a 2-bedroom house for $12,000 at age 38, and he lived there for the rest of his life. He was widowed at age 50 and never remarried. A friend recalled that his main hobby was chopping firewood. Reed died in 2014, just 10 years ago, age 92, which is when the humble rural janitor made international headlines. 2,813,503 Americans died in 2014. Fewer than 4,000 of them had a net worth of over $8 million when they passed away. Ronald Reed was one of them. In his will, the former janitor left $2 million to his stepkids and more than $6 million to his local hospital and library. Those who knew Reed were baffled. Where did he get all that money? Well, it turned out there was no secret. There was no lottery win and no inheritance. Reed saved what little he could and invested in blue chip stocks. Then he waited for decades on end as tiny savings compounded into more than $8 million. And that's it. From janitor to philanthropist. A few months before Ronald Reed died, though, Morgan says, another man named Richard was in the news. Richard Fuscone was everything Ronald Reed was not. A Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with an MBA. Fuscone had such a successful career in finance that he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. Former Merrill CEO David Komansky praised Fuscone's business savvy, leadership skills, sound judgment, and personal integrity. Crane's Business magazine once included him in a 40 under 40 list of successful business people. But then, like the gold coin skipping tech executive, everything fell apart. In the mid-2000s, Fuscone borrowed heavily to expand an 18,000 square foot home in Greenwich, Connecticut that had 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, 7 garages, and cost more than $90,000 a month to maintain. Ouch. Then the 2008 financial crisis hit. The crisis hurt virtually everyone's finances. It apparently turned Fuscone's into dust. High debt and illiquid assets left him bankrupt. I currently have no income, he allegedly told a bankruptcy judge in 2008. First, his Palm Beach house was foreclosed. Okay? In 2014, it was the Greenwich Mansion's turn. 5 months before Ronald Reed, hold on one second. Yeah, there it is. 5 months before Ronald Reed left his fortune to charity, Richard's home, where guests recalled the thrill of dining and dancing atop a see-through covering on the home's indoor swimming pool. Can you imagine doing that? Hanging out on an indoor glass looking over a pool? That was sold in a foreclosure auction for 75% less than an insurance company figured that it was worth. Here's the point. Ronald Reed was patient. What was the problem with Richard Fuscone? He was greedy. He was greedy. You see, one man used his resources on himself. The other man used his resources for others. And Jesus had some wisdom from 2,000 years ago when he said, hey friends, don't be greedy. Be generous. Don't be greedy. Be generous. We cannot be generous if we have a greedy heart. Generosity, on the other hand, is having a giving heart, which I know that many of you do. Generosity is having a giving heart. So why should we be generous anyway? What's the point? Why should we be generous? Well, Jesus has something to say about it in verses 22 and 23. Matthew 6:22. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? In ancient Jewish thought, the eye was seen as the lamp. It was seen as the source of light for the body. The eye was responsible for how a person views and interacts with the world. The concept of the eye guiding the body was tied to an understanding that how one sees the world directly affects how they live in it. Isn't that true today? The way that we see the world directly affects how we live in this world. Light, according to Jesus, symbolized righteousness, truth, God's kingdom, gospel realities, eternal realities. Darkness, on the other hand, symbolized evil, ignorance, sin, wickedness, greed. To have a healthy eye means that my heart is focused on God, His kingdom, and serving others, which brings light, it brings clarity, and it brings joy. To have an unhealthy eye means that my heart is obsessed with materialism, with selfish ambition and greed, hoarding, which brings darkness to my soul. So what are you saying, Jesus? Jesus is saying this: greed is not the path to lasting joy. Greed is not the path to lasting joy. What is the path to lasting joy? Generosity is the path to lasting happiness. Generosity is the path to lasting happiness. Friends, we know this to be true. I think of the times when I traveled to the Philippines with my mother. My mom worked so hard as a registered nurse, studied in Manila, the Philippines, emigrated here in the late 70s. I remember traveling to the Philippines. Back in the day, when, you remember let me ask some of the people who traveled to the Philippines. What was the weight limit for packages before the 50-pound limit now? What was it? 70 pounds. I remember my dad, my mom, me and my sister carrying 8 big boxes, 69.9 pounds each. They are called what they call balikbayan boxes. You know what that is? The word balik, okay, in Tagalog, means to return. The word bayan means country and town. So we're returning goodness or returning gifts to our country and our town. And they didn't feel like gifts for me because I was carrying them. Okay? 8 balikbayan boxes. But I remember going to the province about 6 hours north of Manila. And I remember the last time I was there in 2009 when we brought these boxes, and you open up these boxes, and then family and friends, they just come. They're like, oh, Colgate and clothing and Hershey's chocolate. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. Underwear, like these things that are normal we take for granted. They're like, thank you so much, Auntie. Thank you so much, Auntie Lily. That's my mom's name. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. There is something about generosity that gives you a satisfaction of joy. I think about all the times that my mom worked so hard just to put, as a single mother, to put me and my sister through Christian education through school. The amount of time she worked so that she could pay for our education. The sacrifice that she made. Even the times where she's now sick and she says, hey, and she starts to tear up, give $100 to each kid for their birthdays. Those aren't tears of sadness, those are tears of joy, because there's something within the human heart that says when I'm generous, it brings back, it gives me joy. This is why we're generous. We'll put a picture on the screen. Last night, we had what we call our new member orientation. There's a picture, Raiden will put it up on the screen. So what we're doing now here at Hinsdale Fil-am is we're having a new member orientation at least 3 or 4 times a year, where new members and people who are considering becoming members of our church, we eat food together, worship, and just talk about the joys of our church and how they get plugged in. And here's the group that was at our house last night. And you know what's so cool? I was thinking about this morning. Each and every one of those individuals are making an impact in the organizations that they serve, whether it's school, hospital, business, whatever element, whatever field that you're in. Every single one of those individuals, even as retirees, right? Every single one of the individuals are giving of their time and their resources to make a difference. And there was one group that we just bragged on last night. I have bragged on them before. It's our social committee, the team that's in charge of our potluck. Do you understand how much time and energy it takes to plan an amazing meal every single week? There is something amazing, and all of you know, all the aunties in here, Laura was telling us last night, the ladies in this church are amazing. I'm offended she didn't talk about the men, but that's okay. The ladies in this church are amazing. It is so true. And there's something sweet about, you all know, you cook a meal and then you see someone take that, put it on a plate, and then eat it with a big smile on their face. There's something satisfying when you know that you have served people well. The shoebox ministry that we have, today's the deadline. All right, we have the shoebox ministry. We have stuffed it with goodies. We're going to be labeling it and mailing it to people who don't have much. There's something special, and the satisfaction of joy that we experience in our hearts when we know that we are doing good for others. Generosity, friends, is the path to true happiness. We've learned that generosity is having a giving heart. Number 2, generosity is the path to true happiness. Last but not least, how can we be generous people? How can we do that? Well, Jesus said in verses 19 and 20, Matthew 6, 19 and 20, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. And then notice what he says in verse 20, but store up for yourselves treasures where? In heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. Store up. To become generous, we must store up treasures in heaven. Now, what does it mean to store up treasures in heaven? It means this. To store up treasures in heaven means that we prioritize eternal values over temporary and earthly gains. To store up treasures in heaven means that the majority of our resources, all of our resources, are focused on eternal realities instead of temporal realities. So how do we actually do this? Let me give you a few suggestions. It means that you use your resources, your tenacity, your drive, your purpose, your talent, your time, your treasure to bless others and to advance God's kingdom. Here's what it looks like practically. One idea would be to do a weekly planning session for about an hour to schedule your generous priorities. So let me explain it this way. I'm realizing, I think to myself, well, in order for me to be generous, I need to go serve the homeless. That's a good thing, and that is true. We should do that. I'm also realizing in life that one of the most generous things that I can do is to be fully engaged and to be fully present in the work and with the people that I work with. To give something and someone my full attention. And so what I've been practicing is what I call a weekly sync time or a weekly planning session, where every week I spend at least an hour reflecting on my journal entries and the thoughts I've learned and processing all of my meeting notes and all of my tasks. And then what I do is then I look at all of my priorities and I put that into my calendar. We're going to get practical here, friends. This is what I do. And so this is what I do. I have I'll call this my vision planner or whatnot. And I have my mission and my purpose written down, which I review. And then down on this section, I just wrote down all my values, the things that are important to me. And you know what's really important for me? Number one, Jesus, my relationship with Jesus. You know what I put here also? I put integrity. That's the top value. You know what integrity is? Integrity, and I wrote down, it is to do the right and most loving thing in the right and most loving way at the right and at the best and early time. That's what integrity is. It means that when I know that I should be stepping up and stop living by complacency and mediocrity, but to live in God's purpose, that I'm going to do everything in my power with God's help to be a person of integrity and to live with courage, to do the right thing, even when it's not easy. That's integrity to me. And God knows in my heart that I have a long way to go. Next, my wife, Catherine. My kids, Eliana and Emily. Friends and mentors. I wrote down a list of values. And then what I do as I plan out my week, I start with what's most important in my life. And I start with my relationship with God. And then I schedule it in my week on repeat. Ideally, this week has been 5:30 in the morning, 30 minutes, or 5:15 in the morning. I've been waking up earlier than that. I'm just motivated because I'm so excited to just wake up and to talk to God. So I schedule my time with God in my planner for the week, in my calendar. And then after I schedule my time with God, I then schedule my time with my family. These are the nights where I will not be working so that I can be present for my family. I have this time, even when I have an evening meeting at, let's say, 7 or 7:30 at night. What I'll do is I'll say, hey, when I pick up the kids between 3:30 or 4, from 3:30 to 7, I have an awesome and amazing opportunity to spend time with my children. And so what I'm aiming to do more is to leave my phone on the counter and take my watch where I can get messages and leave that on the counter so that I can be fully present. I can be generous to my family and my children, whether that's, helping them play piano or cooking food and enjoying a nice meal together. I leave this at the counter so that I can be fully present and be generous with my time and my energy. And then I've been planning my exercise, all right? And these are the specific mornings and days and what I'm going to do in the week to do that and be generous to myself. I plan my rest, and then I also plan my learning. I've been in a habit of reading at least 20 minutes a day for 5 days a week, and I'm going to continue to grow that habit. And then I'm generous in my vocation. And I chart it out this way. In my vocation, my role here as pastor are in 3 compartments: chart, connection, and content. What's chart? is to think and strategize, where is this church going to be in 5 to 10 years? I have to spend time thinking about that. And then there's the second bucket, which is connection. Who are the people that I have the privilege of serving, and how can I help them be their best? And who are the people that I'm going to see this week? And then there's content. It's actually spending time writing and creating content, whether it's a sermon or like this week when I launched my first blog, my blog, when I wrote my article and launched my blog this week. So I'm thinking about my time. And that intentionality is helping me become more generous and present to the very people and the very tasks and roles that I have. No other way that we can be generous is to donate resources to advance God's goodness. Friends, is money evil? No. Money is not evil. It's the love of money that's the problem, right? Money is not a master. It shouldn't be a master. Money is a tool to advance your mission. That's why we have in the Christian practice the practice of tithe and offering. What is tithe? What is tithe anyway? Do you know what that is? In the Old and New Testament, the word tithe, according to Malachi 3 verse 8, will a mere mortal rob God? Yet you rob me, right? Talking to God's people, the church. And then you ask, how are we robbing you? And then God says, in tithes and offerings, you are under a curse, your whole nation, because you are robbing me. And then he has a challenge for us. He says in verse 10, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be good food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. Tithing is the practice, the beautiful practice of building in generosity into my practice and my DNA. Since I was a kid. Some of you do this with your children, and you have had a habit since you were a child. It's setting aside 10% of your gross income for the sake of advancing God's goodness. And maybe you're not there, you're like, I don't know about that 10%, I'm not even giving one. Hey, that's okay. I don't know if I can do 10% right now. Move gradually, take a step, 1, 2, 3 every month. Move at a pace that you can handle. Tithe is 10%, it's returning to God 10% of the resources, the financial resources He gives to us. And then offering is anything that you feel convinced to give above that. Donate resources to advance God's goodness. Next week, we have our special Thanksgiving service, the Sabbath right before Thanksgiving. It's a special one where we encourage all of us to bring a special offering to the church that we're going to bring to the front. I would encourage you to do so. We do this so that we can advance the mission of God's goodness in the world. I'll put this picture on the screen, last few things, and then we're going to wrap this up. We'll put the screen, it's a picture of a mission trip. So the Hinsdale Adventist Academy, they are planning a mission trip in the end of March 23 to April 1 to Bacolod in the Philippines. And we're planning on going. And if you're interested, let us know because there's limited amount of spots. So there's a group of us that are going, and we're going to give of our time and energy, and some of us can't go, but we can give and donate funds to support an evangelistic event. And also, we're going to build a prayer garden in a high school in Bacolod, and an Adventist high school in Bacolod. It's going to be a beautiful thing. Here's another tip to become more generous. Surround yourself with generous people. I've shared this before, the law of the 5. You become an average of the people that you spend most of your time with. And so the way that we can become more generous is to actually spend time with them. And so here's a practical thing. What if there was one person, you can think of one person in your social circle who models generosity, and set up a time this week to grab Starbucks with that person? What if you were to do that and just to ask questions? Hey, how do you do this? What's that like? And if you don't have any friends in your social circle, get a good book and sit down at Starbucks by yourself with your drink and read from the mentors you don't even know from a book. Surround yourself with generous people. And friends, I believe that the most important thing that we can do to become more generous is to carve out time every day to spend time with the most generous person in the universe. You know who that is? Who is the most generous person in the universe? It's Jesus. Verse 21 says, last text, and we're done. Jesus said, For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Question. Where is Jesus' treasure and his heart? Have you thought about that? Who is God's treasure? Take a selfie right now. That's you. You are Christ's treasure. You're his treasure. Carve out every day to spend time with the most generous person in the world. We don't change by statements. We change when we see models, when we see people living this out. And when you see Jesus living this out, when you see Christ pouring his heart out, giving up the treasures of heaven so that we could have the treasures of heaven, when you see his heart, I promise you, when you root yourself in the goodness of God and what Jesus did for you, it's also called the gospel. When you root yourself within that, I promise you, it will create within you a heart of generosity. It will move you to give. One of my daughters just randomly said, we're just in conversation, driving back from school, I think. Just randomly said, after, we're just talking, having conversation, said, you know what, Daddy? I love you. Just came out of nowhere. I'm like, thank you. Made me feel like, all butterflies in my heart, right? It felt good. It felt good because my daughter was telling me, Daddy, I love you. I treasure you. I treasure you. And that's why I can't skip a day without spending time with Jesus to be reminded how much he loves me, how much he treasures me. I can't go a day without reading scripture. I can't go a day without prayer. I can't. Because I just want all of that goodness and the generosity of God because it helps me become generous. And so, friend, I don't know where you are in your walk. I don't know where you are. But this morning, I want to challenge you to face the truth about yourself and to take ownership for your life and for your leadership in your home and your team, in your team and the people that you serve. And I want you to look at the one, not at yourself and how you failed, but the one who never failed, the one who is always generous to us. That's Jesus. There's a Connect card. We'll put this on the screen. If you're a first-time guest, let us know. We'll fill this out, and you'll get a gift in the back from our team. But look, if you're in a place where you're saying, I need to recommit my life with Jesus. I want to begin a relationship with Christ. Let us know as a pastoral team. You can mark it on the card or fill it out on the website with that QR code. If you're interested in baptism, let us know. You're interested in joining a Bible study group, or we'll call it a grow group. We as a church are moving in that direction to becoming a church not just that comes and gathers once a week, but one where we gather in different places, where we meet and we build community in smaller groups. That's where we're going. You want to be part of that? We can start it now. Let us know. But friends, as our praise team comes up on the platform here today, maybe God is speaking to your heart. Today's the day where you can surrender and receive the goodness of God in your heart, which will unlock the goodness in your own heart. Let's stand together. Let's sing about that goodness from this amazing God that we serve.